And now Chapter 10, The Nature of Fruitive Activity. The Supreme Personality of Godhead said, "Taking full shelter in me, with the mind carefully fixed in the devotional service of the Lord, as spoken by me, one should live without personal desire, and practice the social and occupational system called varnashram. A purified soul should see that because the conditioned souls who are dedicated to sense gratification have falsely accepted the objects of sense pleasure as truth, all of their endeavors are doomed to failure. One who is sleeping may see many objects of sense gratification in a dream, but such pleasurable things are merely creations of the mind, and are thus ultimately useless. Similarly, the living entity who is asleep to his spiritual identity also sees many sense objects, but these innumerable objects of temporary gratification are creations of the Lord's illusory potency and have no permanent existence. One who meditates upon them, impelled by the senses, uselessly engages his intelligence. One who has fixed me within his mind as the goal of life should give up activities based on sense gratification, and should instead execute work governed by the regulative principles for advancement. When, however, one is fully engaged in searching out the ultimate truth of the soul, one should not accept the scriptural injunctions governing fruitive activities. One who has accepted me as the supreme goal of life should strictly observe the scriptural injunctions forbidding sinful activities, and, as far as possible, should execute the injunctions prescribing minor regulative duties such as cleanliness. Ultimately, however, one should approach a bona fide spiritual master who is as full in knowledge of me as I am, who is peaceful, and who, by spiritual elevation, is not different from me. The servant or disciple of the spiritual master should be free from false prestige, never considering himself to be the doer. He should be active and never lazy, and should give up all sense of proprietorship over the objects of the senses, including his wife, children, home, and society. He should be endowed with feelings of loving friendship toward the spiritual master, and should never become deviated or bewildered. The servant or disciple should always desire advancement in spiritual understanding, should not envy anyone, and should always avoid useless conversation. One should see one's real self-interest in life in all circumstances, and should therefore remain detached from wife, children, home, land, relatives, friends, wealth, and so on. Just as fire, which burns and illuminates, is different from firewood, which is to be burned to give illumination, similarly, the seer within the body, the self-enlightened spirit soul, is different from the material body, which is to be illuminated by consciousness. Thus the spirit soul and the body possess different characteristics and are separate entities. Just as fire may appear differently as dormant, manifest, weak, brilliant, and so on, according to the condition of the fuel, similarly, the spirit soul enters a material body and accepts particular bodily characteristics. The subtle and gross material bodies are created by the material modes of nature, which expand from the potency of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Material existence occurs when the living entity falsely accepts the qualities of the gross and subtle bodies as being his own factual nature. This illusory state, however, can be destroyed by real knowledge. Therefore, by the cultivation of knowledge, one should approach the Supreme Personality of Godhead within oneself. By understanding the Lord's pure, transcendental existence, one should gradually give up the false vision of the material world as independent reality. The spiritual master can be compared to the lower kindling stick, the disciple to the upper kindling stick, and the instruction given by the Guru to the third stick placed in between. The transcendental knowledge communicated from Guru to disciple is compared to the fire arising from the contact of these, which burns the darkness of ignorance to ashes, bringing great happiness both to Guru and disciple. By submissively hearing from an expert spiritual master, the expert disciple develops pure knowledge, which repels the onslaught of material illusion arising from the three modes of material nature. Finally, this pure knowledge itself ceases just as fire ceases when the stock of fuel has been consumed. My dear Urdhava, I have thus explained to you perfect knowledge. There are philosophers, however, who challenge my conclusion. They state that the natural position of the living entity is to engage in fruitive activities, and they see him as the enjoyer of the happiness and unhappiness that accrue from his own work. According to this materialistic philosophy, the world, time, the revealed scriptures, and the self are all variegated and eternal, existing as a perpetual flow of transformations. Knowledge, moreover, cannot be one or eternal, because it arises from the different and changing forms of objects. Thus, knowledge itself is always subject to change. Even if you accept such a philosophy, my dear Urdhava, there will still be perpetual birth, death, old age, and disease, since all living entities must accept a material body subject to the influence of time. Although the performer of fruitive activities desires perpetual happiness, it is clearly observed that materialistic workers are often unhappy and only occasionally satisfied, thus proving that they are not independent or in control of their destiny. When a person is always under the superior control of another, how can he expect any valuable results from his own fruitive actions? It is observed within the material world that sometimes even an intelligent person is not happy. Similarly, sometimes even a great fool is happy. The concept of becoming happy through expertly performing material activities is simply a useless exhibition of false egotism. Even if people know how to achieve happiness and avoid unhappiness, they still do not know the process by which death will not be able to exert its power over them. Death is not at all pleasing, and since everyone is exactly like a condemned man being led to the place of execution, what possible happiness can people derive from material objects or the gratification they provide? That material happiness of which we hear, such as promotion to heavenly planets for celestial enjoyment, is just like that material happiness we have already experienced. Both are polluted by jealousy, envy, decay, and death. Therefore, just as an attempt to raise crops becomes fruitless if there are many problems like crop disease, insect plague, or drought, similarly, the attempt to attain material happiness, either on earth or on the heavenly planets, is always fruitless because of innumerable obstacles. If one performs Vedic sacrifices and fruitive rituals without any mistake or contamination, one will achieve a heavenly situation in the next life. But even this result, which is only achieved by perfect performance of fruitive rituals, will be vanquished by time. Now hear of this. If on earth one performs sacrifices for the satisfaction of the demigods, he goes to the heavenly planets where, just like a demigod, he enjoys all of the heavenly pleasures he has earned by his performances. Having achieved the heavenly planets, the performer of ritualistic sacrifices travels in a glowing airplane, which he obtains as the result of his piety on earth. Being glorified by songs sung by the Gandharvas and dressed in wonderfully charming clothes, he enjoys life surrounded by heavenly goddesses. accompanied by heavenly women, the enjoyer of the fruits of sacrifice goes on pleasure rides in a wonderful airplane, decorated with circles of tinkling bells, that flies wherever he desires. Being relaxed, comfortable, and happy in the heavenly pleasure gardens, he does not consider that he is exhausting the fruits of his piety and will soon fall down to the mortal world. Until his pious results are used up, the performer of sacrifice enjoys life in the heavenly planets. When the pious results are exhausted, however, he falls down from the pleasure gardens of heaven, being moved against his desire by the force of eternal time. If a human being is engaged in sinful, irreligious activities, either because of bad association or because of his failure to control his senses, then such a person will certainly develop a personality full of material desires. He thus becomes miserly toward others, greedy, and always anxious to exploit the bodies of women. When the mind is so polluted, one becomes violent and aggressive, and without the authority of the Vedic injunctions, slaughters innocent animals for sense gratification. Worshipping ghosts and spirits, the bewildered person falls fully into the grip of unauthorized activities and thus goes to hell, where he receives a material body infected by the darkest modes of nature. In such a degraded body, he unfortunately continues to perform inauspicious activities that greatly increase his future unhappiness, and therefore he again accepts a similar material body. What possible happiness can there be for one who engages in activities inevitably terminating in death? In all the planetary systems, from the heavenly to the hellish, and for all of the great demigods who live for 1,000 yuga cycles, there is fear of me in my form of time. Even Brahma, who possesses the supreme lifespan of 311 trillion 40 billion years, is also afraid of me. The material senses create material activities, either pious or sinful, and the modes of nature set the material senses into motion. The living entity, being fully engaged by the material senses and modes of nature, experiences the various results of fruitive work. As long as the living entity thinks that the modes of material nature have separate existences, he will be obliged to take birth in many different forms, and will experience varieties of material existence. Therefore, the living entity remains completely dependent on fruitive activities under the modes of nature. The conditioned soul who remains dependent on fruitive activities under the material modes of nature will continue to fear me, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, since I impose the results of one's fruitive activities. Those who accept the material concept of life, taking the variegatedness of the modes of nature to be factual, devote themselves to material enjoyment, and are therefore always absorbed in lamentation and grief. When there is agitation and interaction of the material modes of nature, the living entities then describe me in various ways, such as all-powerful time, the self, Vedic knowledge, the universe, one's own nature, religious ceremonies, and so on. O my Lord, a living entity situated within the material body is surrounded by the modes of nature and the happiness and distress that are born of activities caused by these modes. How is it possible that he is not bound by this material encirclement? It may also be said that the living entity is ultimately transcendental and has nothing to do with the material world. Then how is he ever bound by material nature? O my Lord Achyuta, the same living entity is sometimes described as eternally conditioned, and at other times as eternally liberated. I am not able to understand, therefore, the actual situation of the living entity. You, my Lord, are the best of those who are expert in answering philosophical questions. Please explain to me the symptoms by which one can tell the difference between a living entity who is eternally liberated and one who is eternally conditioned. In what various ways would they remain situated, enjoy life, eat, evacuate, lie down, sit, or move about? Thus ends the 10th chapter of the 11th canto of the Shrimad Bhagavatam, entitled The Nature of Fruitive Activity. And now chapter 11, The Symptoms of Conditioned and Liberated Living Entities. The Supreme Personality of Godhead said, My dear Urdhava, due to the influence of the material modes of nature, which are under my control, the living entity is sometimes designated as conditioned and sometimes as liberated. In fact, however, the soul is never really bound up or liberated, and since I am the Supreme Lord of Maya, which is the cause of the modes of nature, I also am never to be considered liberated or in bondage. Just as a dream is merely a creation of one's intelligence, but has no actual substance, similarly, material lamentation, illusion, happiness, distress, and the acceptance of the material body under the influence of Maya are all creations of my illusory energy. In other words, material existence has no essential reality. O Urdhava, both knowledge and ignorance, being products of Maya, are expansions of my potency. Both knowledge and ignorance are beginningless, and perpetually award liberation and bondage to embodied living beings. O most intelligent Urdhava, the living entity, called Jiva, is part and parcel of me, but due to ignorance has been suffering in material bondage since time immemorial. By knowledge, however, he can be liberated. Thus, my dear Urdhava, in the same material body we find opposing characteristics, such as great happiness and misery. That is because both the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is eternally liberated, as well as the conditioned soul, are within the body. I shall now speak to you about their different characteristics. By chance, two birds have made a nest together in the same tree. The two birds are friends and are of similar nature. One of them, however, is eating the fruits of the tree, whereas the other, who does not eat the fruits, is in a superior position due to his potency. The bird who does not eat the fruits of the tree is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who by his omniscience perfectly understands his own position and that of the conditioned living entity, represented by the eating bird. That living entity, on the other hand, does not understand himself or the Lord. He is covered by ignorance and is thus called eternally conditioned, whereas the personality of Godhead, being full of perfect knowledge, is eternally liberated. One who is enlightened in self-realization, although living within the material body, sees himself as transcendental to the body, just as one who has arisen from a dream gives up identification with the dream body. A foolish person, however, although not identical with his material body, but transcendental to it, thinks himself to be situated in the body, just as one who is dreaming sees himself as situated in an imaginary body. An enlightened person who is free from the contamination of material desire does not consider himself to be the performer of bodily activities. Rather, he knows that in all such activities, it is only the senses, born of the modes of nature, that are contacting sense objects, born of the same modes of nature. An unintelligent person situated within the body created by his previous fruitive activities thinks, I am the performer of action. Bewildered by false ego, such a foolish person is therefore bound by fruitive activities, which are in fact carried out by the modes of nature. An enlightened person fixed in detachment engages his body in lying down, sitting, walking, bathing, seeing, touching, smelling, eating, hearing, and so on, but is never entangled by such activities. Indeed, remaining as a witness to all bodily functions, he merely engages his bodily senses with their objects, and does not become entangled like an unintelligent person. Although the sky or space is the resting place of everything, the sky does not mix with anything, nor is it entangled. Similarly, the sun is not at all attached to the water in which it is reflected within innumerable reservoirs, and the mighty wind blowing everywhere is not affected by the innumerable aromas and atmospheres through which it passes. In the same way, a self-realized soul is completely detached from the material body and the material world around it. He is like a person who has awakened and arisen from a dream. With expert vision sharpened by detachment, the self-realized soul cuts all doubts to pieces through knowledge of the self, and completely withdraws his consciousness from the expansion of material variety. A person is considered to be completely liberated from the gross and subtle material bodies when all the functions of his vital energy, senses, mind, and intelligence are performed without material desire. Such a person, although situated within the body, is not entangled. Sometimes, for no apparent reason, one's body is attacked by cruel people or violent animals. At other times, and in other places, one will suddenly be offered great respect or worship. One who does not become angry when attacked, nor satisfied when worshipped, is actually intelligent. A saintly sage sees with equal vision, and therefore is not affected by that which is materially good or bad. Indeed, although he observes others performing good and bad work, and speaking properly and improperly, the sage does not praise or criticize anyone. For the purpose of maintaining his body, a liberated sage should not act, speak, or contemplate in terms of material good or bad. Rather, he should be detached in all material circumstances, and taking pleasure in self-realization, he should wander about engaged in this liberated lifestyle, appearing like a retarded person to outsiders. If through meticulous study one becomes expert in reading Vedic literature, but makes no endeavor to fix one's mind on the Supreme Personality of Godhead, then one's endeavor is certainly like that of a man who works very hard to take care of a cow that gives no milk. In other words, the fruit of one's laborious study of Vedic knowledge will simply be the labor itself. There will be no other tangible result. My dear Urdhava, that man is certainly most miserable who takes care of a cow that gives no milk, an unchaste wife, a body totally dependent on others, useless children, or wealth not utilized for the right purpose. Similarly, one who studies Vedic knowledge, devoid of my glories, is also most miserable. My dear Urdhava, an intelligent person should never take to literatures that do not contain descriptions of my activities, which purify the whole universe. Indeed, I create, maintain, and annihilate the entire material manifestation. Among all my pastime incarnations, the most beloved are Krishna and Balaram. Any so-called knowledge that does not recognize these activities of mine is simply barren and is not acceptable to those who are actually intelligent. Coming to this conclusion of all knowledge, one should give up the false conception of material variety that one imposes upon the soul, and thus cease one's material existence. The mind should be fixed in me, since I am all-pervading. My dear Urdhava, if you are not able to free your mind from all material disturbance, and thus absorb it completely on the spiritual platform, then perform all your activities as an offering to me, without trying to enjoy the fruits. My dear Urdhava, narrations of my pastimes and qualities are all auspicious, and purify the entire universe. A faithful person who constantly hears, glorifies, and remembers such transcendental activities, who, through dramatic performances, relives my pastimes, beginning with my appearance, and who takes full shelter in me, dedicating his religious, sensual, and occupational activities for my satisfaction, certainly obtains unflinching devotional service to me, the eternal personality of Godhead. One who has obtained pure devotional service by association with my devotees always engages in worshipping me. Thus he very easily goes to my abode, which is revealed by my pure devotees. My dear Lord, O Supreme Personality of Godhead, what type of person do you consider to be a true devotee? And what type of devotional service is approved by great devotees as worthy of being offered to your Lordship? My dear Ruler of the Universal Controllers, O Lord of Vaikuntha and Almighty God of the Universe, I am your devotee, and because I love you, I have no other shelter than you. Therefore, please explain this to me. My dear Lord, as the Absolute Truth, you are transcendental to material nature, and like the sky, you are never entangled in any way. Still, being controlled by your devotees' love, you accept many different forms, incarnating according to your devotees' desires. O Urdhava, a saintly person is merciful and never injures others. Even if others are aggressive, he is tolerant and forgiving toward all living entities. His strength and meaning in life come from the truth itself. He is free from all envy and jealousy, and his mind is equal in material happiness and distress. Thus he dedicates his time to work for the welfare of all others. His intelligence is never bewildered by material desires, and he has controlled his senses. His behavior is always pleasing, never harsh, and always exemplary, and he is free from possessiveness. He never endeavors in ordinary worldly activities, and he strictly controls his eating. He therefore always remains peaceful and steady. A saintly person is thoughtful and accepts me as his only shelter. Such a person is very cautious in the execution of his duties, and is never subject to superficial transformations, because he is steady and noble, even in a distressing situation. He has conquered over the 6 material qualities, namely hunger, thirst, lamentation, illusion, old age, and death. He is free from all desire for prestige, and offers honor to others. He is expert in reviving the Krishna consciousness of others, and therefore never cheats anyone. Rather, he is a well-wishing friend to all, being most merciful. Such a saintly person must be considered the most learned of men. He perfectly understands that the ordinary religious duties prescribed by me in various Vedic scriptures possess favorable qualities that purify the performer, and he knows that neglect of such duties constitutes discrepancy in one's life. Having taken complete shelter at my lotus feet, however, a saintly person ultimately renounces such ordinary religious duties and worships me alone. He is thus considered to be the best among all living entities. My devotees may or may not know exactly what I am, who I am, and how I exist, but if they worship me with unalloyed love, then I consider them to be the best of devotees. My dear Urdhava, one can give up false pride and prestige by engaging in the following devotional activities. One may purify oneself by seeing, touching, worshipping, serving, and offering prayers of glorification and obeisances to my form as the deity and to my pure devotees. One should also glorify my transcendental qualities and activities. Hear with love and faith the narrations of my glories, and constantly meditate on me. One should offer to me whatever one acquires, and accepting oneself as my eternal servant, one should give oneself completely to me. One should always discuss my birth and activities, and enjoy life by participating in festivals such as Janmashtami, which glorify my pastimes. In my temple, one should also participate in festivals and ceremonies by singing, dancing, playing musical instruments, and discussing me with other Vaishnavas. One should observe all the regularly celebrated annual festivals by attending ceremonies, pilgrimages, and making offerings. One should also observe religious vows, such as Ekadasi, and take initiation by the procedures mentioned in the Vedas, Pancharatra, and other similar literatures. One should faithfully and lovingly support the installation of my deity, and individually, or in cooperation with others, one should work for the construction of Krishna-conscious temples and cities, as well as flower gardens, fruit gardens, and special areas to celebrate my pastimes. One should consider oneself to be my humble servant, without duplicity, and thus should help to clean the temple, which is my home. First, one should sweep and dust thoroughly, and then one should further cleanse with water and cow dung. Having dried the temple, one should sprinkle scented water and decorate the temple with mandalas. One should thus act just like my servant. A devotee should never advertise his devotional activities. Therefore, his service will not be the cause of false pride. One should never use lamps that are offered to me for other purposes, simply because there is need of illumination. And similarly, one should never offer to me anything that has been offered to or used by others. Whatever is most desired by one within this material world, and whatever is most dear to oneself, one should offer that very thing to me. Such an offering qualifies one for eternal life. O saintly Urdhava, please know that you may worship me in the sun, fire, Brahmins, cows, Vaishnavas, sky, wind, water, earth, individual soul, and all living entities. My dear Urdhava, one should worship me within the sun by chanting selected Vedic mantras, and by performing worship and offering obeisances. One may worship me within fire by offering oblations of ghee, and one may worship me among the Brahmins by respectfully receiving them as guests, even when uninvited. I can be worshipped within the cows by offerings of grass and other suitable grains and paraphernalia for the pleasure and health of the cows. And one may worship me within the Vaishnavas by offering loving friendship to them and honoring them in all respects. Through steady meditation, I am worshipped within the inner space of the heart. And within the air, I can be worshipped by knowledge that prana, the life air, is the chief among elements. I am worshipped within water by offerings of water itself, along with other elements such as flowers and tulsi leaves. And one may worship me within the earth by proper application of confidential seed mantras. One may worship me within the individual living entity by offering food and other enjoyable substances. And one may worship me within all living entities by seeing the supersoul within all of them, thus maintaining equal vision. Thus, in the previously mentioned places of worship, and according to the processes I have described, one should meditate on my peaceful, transcendental form with 4 arms, holding a conch shell, sudarshan disc, club, and lotus flower. In this way one should worship me with fixed attention. One who has executed sacrificial performances and pious works for my satisfaction, and who thus worships me with fixed attention, obtains unflinching devotional service unto me. By the excellent quality of his service, such a worshipper obtains realized knowledge of me. My dear Urdhava, I am personally the ultimate shelter and way of life for saintly liberated persons, and thus if one does not engage in my loving devotional service, which is made possible by associating with my devotees, then for all practical purposes one possesses no effective means for escaping from material existence. My dear Urdhava, O beloved of the Yadu dynasty, because you are my servant, well-wisher, and friend, I shall now speak to you the most confidential knowledge. Please hear as I explain these great mysteries to you. Thus ends the 11th chapter of the 11th canto of the Shrimad Bhagavatam, entitled The Symptoms of Conditioned and Liberated Living Entities. And now chapter 12, Beyond Renunciation and Knowledge. The Supreme Personality of Godhead said, My dear Urdhava, by associating with my pure devotees, one can destroy one's attachment for all objects of material sense gratification. Such purifying association brings me under the control of my devotee. One may perform the Ashtanga Yoga system, engage in philosophical analysis of the elements of material nature, practice non-violence and other ordinary principles of piety, chant the Vedas, perform penances, take to the renounced order of life, execute sacrificial performances, and dig wells, plant trees, and perform other public welfare activities, give in charity, carry out severe vows, worship the demigods, chant confidential mantras, visit holy places, or accept major and minor disciplinary injunctions, but even by performing such activities, one does not bring me under his control. In every yuga, many living entities entangled in the modes of passion and ignorance gained the association of my devotees. Thus, such living entities as the Daityas, Rakshasas, birds, beasts, Gandharvas, Apsaras, Nagas, Siddhas, Charanas, Guhyakas, and Vidyadharas, as well as such lower-class human beings as the Vaishyas, Shudras, women, and others, were able to achieve my supreme abode. Vritrasura, Prahlad Maharaj, and others like them, also achieved my abode by association with my devotees, as did personalities such as Vishaparva, Bali Maharaj, Banasura, Maya, Vibhishan, Sugriva, Hanuman, Jambavan, Gajendra, Jatayu, Tuladhara, Dharmavyadha, Kubja, the gopis in Vrindavan, and the wives of the Brahmins who were performing sacrifice. The persons I have mentioned did not undergo serious studies of the Vedic literature, nor did they worship great saintly persons, nor did they execute severe vows or austerities. Simply by association with me and my devotees, they achieved me. The inhabitants of Vrindavan, including the gopis, cows, unmoving creatures such as the twin Arjun trees, animals, living entities with stunted consciousness, such as bushes and thickets, and snakes such as Kaliya, all achieve the perfection of life by unalloyed love for me, and thus very easily achieve me. Even though one engages with great endeavor in the mystic yoga system, philosophical speculation, charity, vows, penances, ritualistic sacrifices, teaching of Vedic mantras to others, personal study of the Vedas, or the renounced order of life, still one cannot achieve me. The residents of Vrindavan, headed by the gopis, were always completely attached to me with deepest love. Therefore, when, along with my brother Balaram, I was brought to the city of Mathura by my uncle Akrura, the residents of Vrindavan suffered extreme mental distress because of separation from me, and could not find any other source of happiness. Dear Urdhava, all of those nights that the gopis spent with me, their most dearly beloved, in the land of Vrindavan, seemed to them to pass in less than a moment. Bereft of my association, however, the gopis felt that those same nights dragged on forever, as if each night were equal to a day of Brahma. My dear Urdhava, just as great sages in yoga trance merge into self-realization, like rivers merging into the ocean, and are thus not aware of material names and forms, similarly, the gopis of Vrindavan were so completely attached to me within their minds that they could not think of their own bodies, nor of this world, nor of their future lives. Their entire consciousness was simply bound up in me. All those hundreds of thousands of gopis, understanding me to be their most charming lover and ardently desiring me in that way, were unaware of my actual position. Yet by intimately associating with me, the gopis attained me the supreme absolute truth. Therefore, my dear Urdhava, abandon the Vedic mantras as well as the procedures of supplementary Vedic literatures and their positive and negative injunctions. Disregard that which has been heard and that which is to be heard. Simply take shelter of me alone, for I am the Supreme Personality of Godhead, situated within the heart of all conditioned souls. Take shelter of me wholeheartedly, and by my grace be free from fear in all circumstances. O Krishna, Lord of all masters of mystic power, I have heard your words, but the doubt in my heart does not go away. Thus my mind is bewildered. My dear Urdhava, the Supreme Lord gives life to every living being, and is situated within the heart, along with the life air and primal sound vibration. The Lord can be perceived in his subtle form within the heart by one's mind, since the Lord controls the minds of everyone, even great demigods like Lord Shiva. The Supreme Lord also assumes a gross form as the various sounds of the Vedas, composed of short and long vowels and consonants of different intonations. When kindling wood is rubbed together, heat is produced by contact with air, and by vigorously rubbing the sticks, a spark of fire appears. Once the fire is kindled, ghee is added, and the fire blazes. Similarly, I become manifest in the sound vibration of the Vedas. The functions of the working senses, the organ of speech, the hands, the legs, the genital, and the anus, and the functions of the knowledge-acquiring senses, the nose, tongue, eyes, skin, and ears, along with the functions of the subtle senses of mind, intelligence, consciousness, and false ego, as well as the function of the subtle pradhan and the interaction of the three modes of material nature, all these should be understood as my materially manifest form. When many seeds are placed in an agricultural field, innumerable manifestations of trees, bushes, vegetables, and so on will arise from a single source, the soil. Similarly, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who gives life to all and is eternal, originally exists beyond the scope of the cosmic manifestation. In the course of time, however, the Lord, who is the resting place of the three modes of nature, and the source of the universal lotus flower in which the cosmic manifestation takes place, divides his material potencies, and thus appears to be manifest in innumerable forms, although he is one. Just as woven cloth rests on the expansion of lengthwise and crosswise threads, similarly, the entire universe is expanded on the lengthwise and crosswise potency of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and is situated within him. The conditioned soul has been accepting material bodies since time immemorial, and these bodies are like great trees sustaining one's material existence. Just as a tree first blossoms and then produces fruit, similarly the tree of material existence, one's material body, produces the various results of material existence. This tree of material existence has 2 seeds, hundreds of roots, 3 lower trunks, and 5 upper trunks. It produces 5 flavors and has 11 branches and a nest made by 2 birds. The tree is covered by 3 types of bark, gives 2 fruits, and extends up to the sun. Those lusty after material enjoyment and dedicated to family life enjoy one of the tree's fruits, and swan-like men in the renounced order of life enjoy the other fruit. One who, with the help of the bona fide spiritual masters, can understand this tree to be a manifestation of the potency of the one supreme truth appearing in many forms, actually knows the meaning of the Vedic literature. With steady intelligence, you should develop unalloyed devotional service by careful worship of the spiritual master, and with the sharpened axe of transcendental knowledge, you should cut off the subtle material covering of the soul. Upon realizing the Supreme Personality of Godhead, you should then give up that axe of analytic knowledge. Thus ends the 12th chapter of the 11th canto of the Shrimad Bhagavatam, entitled Beyond Renunciation and Knowledge. Now chapter 13. The Hamsa avatar answers the questions of the sons of Brahma. The 3 modes of material nature, namely goodness, passion, and ignorance, pertain to material intelligence and not to the spirit soul. By development of material goodness, one can conquer the modes of passion and ignorance, and by cultivation of transcendental goodness, one may free oneself even from material goodness. When the living entity becomes strongly situated in the mode of goodness, then religious principles, characterized by devotional service to me, become prominent. One can strengthen the mode of goodness by cultivation of those things that are already situated in goodness, and thus religious principles arise. Religious principles, strengthened by the mode of goodness, destroy the influence of passion and ignorance. When passion and ignorance are overcome, their original cause, irreligion, is quickly vanquished. According to the quality of religious scriptures, water, one's association with one's children or with people in general, the particular place, the time, activities, birth, meditation, chanting of mantras, and purificatory rituals, the modes of nature become differently prominent. Among the 10 items I have just mentioned, the great sages who understand Vedic knowledge have praised and recommended those that are in the mode of goodness, criticized and rejected those in the mode of ignorance, and shown indifference to those in the mode of passion. Until one revives one's direct knowledge of the spirit soul and drives away the illusory identification with the material body and mind caused by the 3 modes of nature, one must cultivate those things in the mode of goodness. By increasing the mode of goodness, one automatically can understand and practice religious principles, and by such practice, transcendental knowledge is awakened. In a bamboo forest, the wind sometimes rubs the bamboo stalks together, and such friction generates a blazing fire that consumes the very source of its birth, the bamboo forest. Thus the fire is automatically calmed by its own action. Similarly, by the competition and interaction of the material modes of nature, the subtle and gross material bodies are generated. If one uses his mind and body to cultivate knowledge, then such enlightenment destroys the influence of the modes of nature that generated one's body. Thus, like the fire, the body and mind are pacified by their own actions in destroying the source of their birth. My dear Krishna, generally human beings know that material life brings great future unhappiness, and still they try to enjoy material life. My dear Lord, how can one in knowledge act just like a dog, an ass, or a goat? My dear Urdhava, a person bereft of intelligence first falsely identifies himself with the material body and mind. And when such false knowledge arises within one's consciousness, material passion, the cause of great suffering, pervades the mind, which by nature is situated in goodness. Then the mind, contaminated by passion, becomes absorbed in making and changing many plans for material advancement. Thus, by constantly thinking of the modes of material nature, a foolish person is afflicted with unbearable material desires. One who does not control the material senses comes under the control of material desires, and is thus bewildered by the strong waves of the mode of passion. Such a person executes material activities, although clearly seeing that the result will be future unhappiness. Although the intelligence of a learned person may be bewildered by the modes of passion and ignorance, he should again carefully bring the mind under control. By clearly seeing the contamination of the modes of nature, he does not become attached. A person should be attentive and grave, and never lazy or morose. Mastering the yoga procedures of breathing and sitting properly, one should practice placing the mind in me at dawn, noon, and sunset, and thus gradually the mind should be completely absorbed in me. The actual yoga system, as taught by my devotees, headed by Sanaka Kumara, is simply this. Having withdrawn the mind from all other objects, one should directly and appropriately absorb it in me. My dear Keshava, at what time and in what form did you instruct the science of yoga to Sanaka and his brothers? I now desire to know about these things. O Urdhava, once the mental sons of Lord Brahma, namely the sages headed by Sanaka, inquired from their father about the difficult subject matter of the supreme goal of yoga. The sages, headed by Sanaka, said, O Lord, people's minds are naturally attracted to material sense objects, and similarly, the sense objects in the form of desire enter within the mind. Therefore, how can a person who desires liberation, who desires to cross over activities of sense gratification, destroy this mutual relationship between the sense objects and the mind? Please explain this to us. My dear Urdhava, Brahma himself, who is born directly from the body of the Lord, and who is the creator of all living entities within the material world, being the best of the demigods, seriously contemplated the question of his sons, headed by Sanaka. The intelligence of Brahma, however, was affected by his own activities of creation, and thus he could not discover the essential answer to this question. Lord Brahma desired to attain the answer to the question that was puzzling him, and thus he fixed his mind in me, the Supreme Lord. At that time, in my form of Hamsa, I became visible to Lord Brahma. Thus, seeing me, the sages, placing Brahma in the lead, came forward and worshipped my lotus feet. Then they frankly asked me, Who are you? My dear Urdhava, The sages, being eager to understand the ultimate truth of the yoga system, thus inquired from me, "Now please hear as I explain that which I spoke unto the sages." I said, "My dear Brahmins, if, when asking me who I am, you believe that I am also a jiva soul, and that there is no ultimate difference between us, since all souls are ultimately one without individuality, then how is your question possible or appropriate? Ultimately, what is the real situation or resting place both of yourselves and of me? If by asking me, 'Who are you?' you were referring to the material body, then I must point out that all material bodies are constituted of 5 elements, namely earth, water, fire, air, and ether. Thus you should have asked, 'Who are you 5? If you consider that all material bodies are ultimately one, being constituted essentially of the same elements, then your question is still meaningless, since there would be no deep purpose in distinguishing one body from another. Thus it appears that in asking my identity, you are merely speaking words without any real meaning or purpose. Within this world, whatever is perceived by mind, speech, eyes, or other senses is me alone and nothing besides me. All of you please understand this by a straightforward analysis of the facts. My dear sons, the mind has a natural proclivity to enter into the material sense objects, and similarly the sense objects enter into the mind. But both this material mind and the sense objects are merely designations that cover the spirit soul, who is part and parcel of me. A person who has thus achieved me by understanding that he is not different from me realizes that the material mind is lodged within the sense objects because of constant sense gratification, and that the material objects are existing prominently within the material mind. Having understood my transcendental nature, he gives up both the material mind and its objects. Waking, sleeping, and deep sleep are the 3 functions of the intelligence and are caused by the modes of material nature. The living entity within the body is ascertained to possess characteristics different from these 3 states, and thus remains as a witness to them. The spirit soul is trapped in the bondage of material intelligence, which awards him constant engagement in the illusory modes of nature. But I am the 4th stage of consciousness, beyond wakefulness, dreaming, and deep sleep. Becoming situated in me, the soul should give up the bondage of material consciousness. At that time, the living entity will automatically renounce the material sense objects and the material mind. The false ego of the living entity places him in bondage and awards him exactly the opposite of what he really desires. Therefore, an intelligent person should give up his constant anxiety to enjoy material life and remain situated in the Lord, who is beyond the functions of material consciousness. According to my instructions, one should fix the mind in me alone. If, however, one continues to see many different values and goals in life, rather than seeing everything within me, then although apparently awake, one is actually dreaming due to incomplete knowledge, just as one may dream that one has awakened from a dream. Those states of existence that are conceived of as separate from the Supreme Personality of Godhead have no actual existence, although they create a sense of separation from the Absolute Truth. Just as the seer of a dream imagines many different activities and rewards, similarly, because of the sense of an existence separate from the Lord's existence, the living entity falsely performs fruitive activities, thinking them to be the cause of future rewards and destinations. While awake, the living entity enjoys with all of his senses the fleeting characteristics of the material body and mind. While dreaming, he enjoys similar experiences within the mind. And in deep, dreamless sleep, all such experiences merge into ignorance. By remembering and contemplating the succession of wakefulness, dreaming, and deep sleep, the living entity can understand that he is one throughout the three stages of consciousness and is transcendental. Thus he becomes the Lord of the senses. You should consider how, by the influence of my illusory energy, these three states of the mind, caused by the modes of nature, have been artificially imagined to exist in me. Having definitely ascertained the truth of the soul, you should utilize the sharpened sword of knowledge acquired by logical reflection and from the instructions of sages and Vedic literatures to completely cut off the false ego, which is the breeding ground of all doubts. All of you should then worship me who am situated within the heart. One should see that the material world is a distinct illusion appearing in the mind, because material objects have an extremely flickering existence, and are here today and gone tomorrow. They can be compared to the streaking red line created by whirling a fiery stick. The spirit soul by nature exists in the single state of pure consciousness. However, in this world, he appears in many different forms and stages of existence. The modes of nature divide the soul's consciousness into normal wakefulness, dreaming, and dreamless sleep. All such varieties of perception, however, are actually Maya, and exist only like a dream. Having understood the temporary illusory nature of material things, and thus having pulled one's vision away from illusion, one should remain without material desires. By experiencing the happiness of the soul, one should give up material speaking and activities. If sometimes one must observe the material world, one should remember that it is not ultimate reality, and therefore one has given it up. By such constant remembrance up till the time of death, one will not again fall into illusion. Just as a drunken man does not notice if he is wearing his coat or shirt, similarly, one who is perfect in self-realization and who has thus achieved his eternal identity does not notice whether the temporary body is sitting or standing. Indeed, if by God's will the body is finished, or if by God's will he obtains a new body, a self-realized soul does not notice, just as a drunken man does not notice the situation of his outward dress. The material body certainly moves under the control of supreme destiny, and therefore must continue to live along with the senses and vital air, as long as one's karma is in effect. A self-realized soul, however, who is awakened to the absolute reality, and who is thus highly situated in the perfect stage of yoga, will never again surrender to the material body and its manifold manifestations, knowing it to be just like a body visualized in a dream. My dear Brahmins, I have now explained to you the confidential knowledge of Sankhya, by which one philosophically distinguishes matter from spirit, and of Ashtanga Yoga, by which one links up with the Supreme. Please understand that I am the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Vishnu, and that I have appeared before you desiring to explain your actual religious duties. O best of Brahmins, please know that I am the supreme shelter of the yoga system, analytic philosophy, virtuous action, truthful religious principles, power, beauty, fame, and self-control. All superior transcendental qualities, such as being beyond the modes of nature, detached, the well-wisher, the most dear, the super-soul, equally situated everywhere, and free from material entanglement, all such qualities free from the transformations of material qualities, find their shelter and worshipable object in me. My dear Urdhava, thus all of the doubts of the sages, headed by Sanaka, were destroyed by my words. Fully worshipping me with transcendental love and devotion, they chanted my glories with excellent hymns. The greatest of sages, headed by Sanaka Rishi, thus perfectly worshipped and glorified me, and as Lord Brahma looked on, I returned to my own abode. Thus ends the 13th chapter of the 11th canto of the Shrimad Bhagavatam, entitled The Hamsa Avatar Answers the Questions of the Sons of Brahma. And now chapter 14. Lord Krishna explains the yoga system to Sri Urdhava. Sri Urdhava said, My dear Krishna, the learned sages who explain Vedic literature recommend various processes for perfecting one's life. Considering these varieties of viewpoint, my Lord, please tell me whether all these processes are equally important or whether one of them is supreme. My dear Lord, you have clearly explained the process of unalloyed devotional service, by which a devotee removes all material association from his life, enabling him to fix his mind in you. O Urdhava, by the influence of time, the transcendental sound of Vedic knowledge was lost at the time of annihilation. Therefore, when the subsequent creation took place, I spoke the Vedic knowledge to Brahma, because I myself am the religious principles enunciated in the Vedas. Lord Brahma spoke this Vedic knowledge to his eldest son, Manu, and the 7 great sages, headed by Bhrigu Muni, then accepted the same knowledge from Manu. From the forefathers, headed by Bhrigu Muni and other sons of Brahma, appeared many children and descendants who assumed different forms as demigods, demons, human beings, Guhyakas, Siddhas, Gandharvas, Vidyadharas, Charanas, Kindevas, Kinnaras, Nagas, Kimpurushas, and so on. All of the many universal species, along with their respective leaders, appeared with different natures and desires generated from the 3 modes of material nature. Therefore, because of the different characteristics of the living entities within the universe, there are a great many Vedic rituals, mantras, and rewards. Thus, due to the great variety of desires and natures among human beings, there are many different theistic philosophies of life, which are handed down through tradition, custom, and disciplic succession. There are other teachers who directly support atheistic viewpoints. O best among men, the intelligence of human beings is bewildered by my illusory potency, and thus, according to their own activities and whims, they speak in innumerable ways about what is actually good for people. Some say that people will be happy by performing pious religious activities. Others say that happiness is attained through fame, sense gratification, truthfulness, self-control, peace, self-interest, political influence, opulence, renunciation, consumption, sacrifice, penance, charity, vows, regulated duties, or strict disciplinary regulation. Each process has its proponents. All the persons I have just mentioned obtain temporary fruits from their material work. Indeed, the meager and miserable situations they achieve bring future unhappiness and are based on ignorance. Even while enjoying the fruits of their work, such persons are filled with lamentation. O learned Urdhava, those who fix their consciousness in me, giving up all material desires, share with me a happiness that cannot possibly be experienced by those engaged in sense gratification. One who does not desire anything within this world, who has achieved peace by controlling his senses, whose consciousness is equal in all conditions, and whose mind is completely satisfied in me, finds only happiness wherever he goes. One who has fixed his consciousness in me does not desire the position or abode of Lord Brahma or Lord Indra, nor an empire on the earth, nor sovereignty in the lower planetary systems, nor the eightfold perfection of yoga, nor liberation from birth and death. Such a person desires me alone. My dear Urdhava, even Lord Brahma, Lord Shiva, Lord Sankarshan, the goddess of fortune Lakshmi, and indeed my own self are not as dear to me as you are. I desire to purify with the dust of the lotus feet of my devotees the material worlds which are situated within me. Thus I always follow the footsteps of my pure devotees, who are free from all personal desire, wrapped in thought of my pastimes, peaceful, without any feelings of enmity, and of equal disposition everywhere. Those who are without any desire for personal gratification, whose minds are always attached to me, who are peaceful, without false ego, and merciful to all living entities, and whose consciousness is never affected by opportunities for sense gratification, such persons enjoy in me a happiness that cannot be known or achieved by those lacking such detachment from the material world. My dear Urdhava, not having fully conquered his senses, my devotee may be harassed by material desires, but because of his unflinching devotion for me, he will not be defeated by sense gratification. My dear Urdhava, just as a blazing fire turns firewood into ashes, similarly, devotion unto me completely burns to ashes sins committed by my devotees. My dear Urdhava, the unalloyed devotional service rendered to me by my devotees brings me under their control. I cannot be thus controlled by those engaged in mystic yoga, Sankhya philosophy, pious work, Vedic study, austerity, or renunciation. Only by practicing unalloyed devotional service with full faith in me can one obtain me, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. I am naturally dear to my devotees, who take me as the only goal of their loving service. By engaging in such pure devotional service, even the dog-eaters can purify themselves from the contamination of their low birth. Neither religious activities endowed with honesty and mercy, nor knowledge obtained with great penance can completely purify one's consciousness if they are bereft of loving service to me. If one's hairs do not stand on end, how can the heart melt? And if the heart does not melt, how can tears of love flow from the eyes? If one does not cry in spiritual happiness, how can one render loving service to the Lord? And without such service, how can the consciousness be purified? A devotee whose speech is sometimes choked up, whose heart melts, who cries continually, and sometimes laughs, who feels ashamed and cries out loudly, and then dances, a devotee thus fixed in loving service to me purifies the entire universe. Just as gold, when smelted in fire, gives up its impurities and returns to its pure, brilliant state, similarly, the spirit soul, absorbed in the fire of bhakti yoga, is purified of all contamination caused by previous fruitive activities and returns to its original position of serving me in the spiritual world. When a diseased eye is treated with medicinal ointment, it gradually recovers its power to see. Similarly, as a conscious living entity cleanses himself of material contamination by hearing and chanting the pious narrations of my glories, he regains his ability to see me, the absolute truth, in my subtle spiritual form. The mind of one meditating upon the objects of sense gratification is certainly entangled in such objects. But if one constantly remembers me, then the mind is absorbed in me. Therefore, one should reject all material processes of elevation, which are like the mental creations of a dream, and should completely absorb one's mind in me. By constantly thinking of me, one becomes purified. Being conscious of the eternal self, one should give up association with women, and those intimately associated with women. Sitting fearlessly in a solitary place, one should concentrate the mind on me with great attention. Of all kinds of suffering and bondage arising from various attachments, none is greater than the suffering and bondage arising from attachment to women and intimate contact with those attached to women. O Urdhava, sitting on a level seat that is not too high or too low, keeping the body straight and erect yet comfortable, placing the two hands on one's lap, and focusing the eyes on the tip of one's nose, one should purify the pathways of breathing by practicing the mechanical exercises of puraka, kumbhaka, and rechaka, and then one should reverse the procedure, rechaka, kumbhaka, puraka. Having fully controlled the senses, one may thus practice pranayama step by step. Beginning from the Muladhara chakra, one should move the life air continuously upward, like the fibers in the lotus stalk, until one reaches the heart, where the sacred syllable Om is situated, like the sound of a bell. One should thus continue raising the sacred syllable upward the distance of 12 angulas, and there the Omkar should be joined together with the 15 vibrations produced with Anusvara. Being fixed in the Omkar, one should carefully practice the pranayama system 10 times at each sunrise, noon, and sunset. Then, after 1 month, one will have conquered the life air. Keeping the eyes half closed and fixed on the tip of one's nose, being enlivened and alert, one should meditate on the lotus flower situated within the heart. The lotus has 8 petals and is situated on an erect lotus stalk. One should meditate on the sun, moon, and fire, placing them one after the other within the whirl of that lotus flower. Placing my transcendental form within the fire, one should meditate upon it as the auspicious goal of all meditation. That form is perfectly proportioned, gentle, and cheerful. It possesses 4 beautiful long arms, a charming, beautiful neck, a handsome forehead, a pure smile, and glowing shark-shaped earrings suspended from 2 identical ears. That spiritual form is the color of a dark rain cloud, and is garbed in golden yellowish silk. The chest of that form is the abode of Srivatsa and the goddess of fortune, and that form is also decorated with a conch shell, disc, club, lotus flower, and garland of forest flowers. The 2 brilliant lotus feet are decorated with ankle bells and bracelets, and that form exhibits the Kaustubha gem along with an effulgent crown. The upper hips are beautified by a golden belt, and the arms are decorated with valuable bracelets. All of the limbs of that beautiful form capture the heart, and the face is beautified by merciful glancing. Pulling the senses back from the sense objects, one should be grave and self-controlled, and should use the intelligence to strongly fix the mind upon all of the limbs of my transcendental body. Thus one should meditate upon that most delicate transcendental form of mine. One should then pull the consciousness back from all the limbs of that transcendental body, At that time, one should meditate only on the wonderfully smiling face of the Lord. Being established in meditation on the Lord's face, one should then withdraw the consciousness and fix it in the sky. Then, giving up such meditation, one should become established in me and give up the process of meditation altogether. One who has completely fixed his mind in me should see me within his own soul, and should see the individual soul within me, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Thus he sees the individual souls united with the Supreme Soul, just as one sees the sun's rays completely united with the sun. When the yogi thus controls his mind by intensely concentrated meditation, his illusory identification with material objects, knowledge, and activities is very quickly extinguished. Thus ends the 14th chapter of the 11th canto of the Shrimad Bhagavatam, entitled Lord Krishna Explains the Yoga System to Sri Urdhava. And now chapter 15, Lord Krishna's description of mystic yoga perfection. The Supreme Personality of Godhead said, My dear Urdhava, the mystic perfections of yoga are acquired by a yogi who has conquered his senses, steadied his mind, conquered the breathing process, and fixed his mind in me. My dear Lord Achyuta, by what process can mystic perfection be achieved, and what is the nature of such perfection? How many mystic perfections are there? Please explain these things to me. Indeed, you are the bestower of all mystic perfections. O Urdhava, the masters of the yoga system have declared that there are 18 types of mystic perfection and meditation, of which 8 are primary, having their shelter in me, and 10 are secondary, appearing from the material mode of goodness. Among the 8 primary mystic perfections, those 3 by which one adjusts one's own body are Anima, becoming smaller than the smallest, Mahima, becoming greater than the greatest, and Laghima, becoming lighter than the lightest. Through the perfection of Prapti, one acquires whatever one desires, and through Prakamya Siddhi, one experiences any enjoyable object, either in this world or the next. Through Ishita Siddhi, one can manipulate the sub-potencies of Maya, and through the controlling potency called Vashita Siddhi, one is unimpeded by the 3 modes of nature. One who has acquired Kamavasayita Siddhi can obtain anything from anywhere, to the highest possible limit. My dear gentle Urdhava, these 8 mystic perfections are considered to be naturally existing and unexcelled within this world. The 10 secondary mystic perfections arising from the modes of nature are the powers of freeing oneself from hunger and thirst and other bodily disturbances, hearing and seeing things far away, moving the body at the speed of the mind, assuming any form one desires, entering the bodies of others, dying when one desires, witnessing the pastimes between the demigods and the celestial girls called Apsaras, completely executing one's determination, and giving orders whose fulfillment is unimpeded. The power to know past, present, and future, tolerance of heat, cold, and other dualities, knowing the minds of others, checking the influence of fire, sun, water, poison, and so on, and remaining unconquered by others, these constitute 5 perfections of the mystic process of yoga and meditation. I am simply listing these here according to their names and characteristics. Now please learn from me how specific mystic perfections arise from specific meditations, and also of the particular processes involved. One who worships me in my atomic form, pervading all subtle elements, fixing his mind on that alone, obtains the mystic perfection called anima. One who absorbs his mind in the particular form of the Mahatattva, and thus meditates upon me as the supreme soul of the total material existence, achieves the mystic perfection called Mahima. By further absorbing the mind in the situation of each individual element, such as the sky, air, fire, and so on, one progressively acquires the greatness of each material element. I exist within everything, and I am therefore the essence of the atomic constituents of material elements. By fixing his mind to me in this form, the yogi may achieve the perfection called Laghima, by which he realizes the subtle atomic substance of time. Fixing his mind completely in me within the element of false ego, generated from the mode of goodness, the yogi obtains the power of mystic acquisition, by which he becomes the proprietor of the senses of all living entities. He obtains such perfection because his mind is absorbed in me. One who concentrates all mental activities in me as the supersoul of that phase of the Mahatattva which manifests the chain of fruitive activities, obtains from me, whose appearance is beyond material perception, the most excellent mystic perfection called Prakamya. One who concentrates his consciousness in Vishnu, the Supersoul, the prime mover and supreme lord of the external energy, consisting of the three modes, obtains the mystic perfection of controlling other conditioned souls, their material bodies, and their bodily designations. The yogi who places his mind in my form of Narayan, known as the fourth factor, full of all opulences, becomes endowed with my nature, and thus obtains the mystic perfection called Vashita. One who fixes the pure mind in me in my manifestation as the impersonal Brahman obtains the greatest happiness, wherein all his desires are completely fulfilled. A human being who concentrates on me as the upholder of religious principles, the personification of purity and the lord of Shvetadvipa, obtains the pure existence in which he is freed from the 6 waves of material disturbance, namely hunger, thirst, decay, death, grief, and illusion. That purified living entity who fixes his mind on the extraordinary sound vibrations occurring within me as the personified sky and the total life air is then able to perceive within the sky the speaking of all living entities. Merging one's sight into the sun planet and then the sun planet into one's eyes, one should meditate with the mind on me existing within the combination of sun and vision. Thus one acquires the power to see any distant thing. The yogi who completely absorbs his mind in me, and who then makes use of the wind that follows the mind to absorb the material body in me, obtains, through the potency of meditation on me, the mystic perfection by which his body immediately follows his mind wherever it goes. When the yogi, applying his mind in a certain way, desires to assume a particular form, that very form immediately appears. Such perfection is possible by absorbing the mind in the shelter of my inconceivable mystic potency, by which I assume innumerable forms. When a perfect yogi desires to enter another's body, he should meditate upon himself within the other body, and then, giving up his own gross body, he should enter the other's body, through the pathways of air, as easily as a bee leaves a flower and flies into another. The yogi who has achieved the mystic perfection, called Svachanda Mrityu, blocks the anus with the heel of the foot, and then lifts the soul from the heart to the chest, to the neck, and finally to the head. Situated within the Brahma Randhra, the yogi then gives up his material body and guides the spirit soul to the selected destination. The yogi who desires to enjoy in the pleasure gardens of the demigods should meditate on the purified mode of goodness, which is situated within me. And then the heavenly women, generated from the mode of goodness, will approach him in airplanes. A yogi who has faith in me, absorbing his mind in me, and knowing that my purpose is always fulfilled, will always achieve his purpose by the very means he has determined to follow. A person who perfectly meditates on me acquires my nature of being the supreme ruler and controller. His order, like mine, can never be frustrated by any means. A yogi who has purified his existence by devotion to me, and who thus expertly knows the process of meditation, obtains knowledge of past, present, and future. He can therefore see the birth and death of himself and others. Just as the bodies of aquatics cannot be injured by water, similarly, the body of a yogi whose consciousness is pacified by devotion to me and who is fully developed in yoga science cannot be injured by fire, sun, water, poison, and so forth. My devotee becomes unconquerable by meditating on my opulent incarnations, which are decorated with Srivatsa and various weapons, and are endowed with imperial paraphernalia such as flags, ornamental umbrellas, and fans. A learned devotee who worships me through yoga meditation certainly obtains in all respects the mystic perfections that I have described. For a sage who has conquered his senses, breathing, and mind, who is self-controlled and always absorbed in meditation on me, what mystic perfection could possibly be difficult to achieve? Learned experts in devotional service state that the mystic perfections of yoga that I have mentioned are actually impediments and are a waste of time for one who is practicing the supreme yoga by which one achieves all perfection in life directly from me. Whatever mystic perfections can be achieved by good birth, herbs, austerities, and mantras can all be achieved by devotional service to me. Indeed, one cannot achieve the actual perfection of yoga by any other means. My dear Urdhava, I am the cause, the protector, and the Lord of all mystic perfections, of the yoga system, of analytic knowledge, of pure activity, and of the community of learned Vedic teachers. Just as the same material elements exist within and outside of all material bodies, similarly, I cannot be covered by anything else. I exist within everything as the Supersoul, and outside of everything in my all-pervading feature. Thus ends the 15th chapter of the 11th canto of the Shrimad Bhagavatam, entitled Lord Krishna's Description of Mystic Yoga Perfections. And now chapter 16, the Lord's Opulence. My dear Lord, you are beginningless and endless, the Absolute Truth Himself, unlimited by anything else. You are the protector and life-giver, the destruction and creation of all things that exist. My dear Lord, although it is difficult for the impious to understand that you are situated in all superior and inferior creations, those Brahmins who are actual knowers of the Vedic conclusion worship you in truth. Please tell me of the perfections that great sages achieve by worshipping you with devotion. Also, kindly explain which of your different forms they worship. O my Lord, maintainer of all, although you are the supersoul of the living entities, you remain hidden. Thus, being bewildered by you, the living entities cannot see you, although you are seeing them. O supremely potent Lord, please explain to me your innumerable potencies which you manifest on the earth, in heaven, in hell, and indeed in all directions. I offer my humble obeisances at your lotus feet, which are the shelter of all holy places. O Urdhava, O best of those who know how to inquire, on the battlefield of Kurukshetra, Arjuna, desiring to fight with his rivals, asked me the same question that you are now posing. On the battlefield of Kurukshetra, Arjuna thought that killing his relatives would be an abominable, irreligious activity motivated only by his desire to acquire a kingdom. He therefore desisted from the battle, thinking, I would be the killer of my relatives. They would be destroyed. Thus Arjuna was afflicted with mundane consciousness. At that time I enlightened Arjuna, the tiger among men, with logical arguments, and thus in the front of the battle Arjuna addressed me with questions in the same way that you are now inquiring. My dear Urdhava, I am the super-soul of all living entities, and therefore I am naturally their well-wisher and supreme controller. Being the creator, maintainer, and annihilator of all entities, I am not different from them. I am the ultimate goal of all those seeking progress, and I am time among those who exert control. I am the equilibrium of the modes of material nature, and I am natural virtue among the pious. Among things possessing qualities, I am the primary manifestation of nature, and among great things I am the total material creation. Among subtle things I am the spirit soul, and of things that are difficult to conquer I am the mind. Among the Vedas I am their original teacher, Lord Brahma, and of all mantras I am the three-lettered Omkar. Among letters I am the first letter A, and among sacred meters I am the Gayatri mantra. Among the demigods I am Indra, and among the Vasus I am Agni, the god of fire. I am Vishnu among the sons of Aditi, and among the Rudras I am Lord Shiva. Among saintly Brahmins I am Bhrigu Muni, and I am Manu among saintly kings. I am Narad Muni among saintly demigods, and I am Kamadhenu among cows. I am Lord Kapila among perfected beings, and Garuda among birds. I am Daksha among the progenitors of mankind, and I am Aryama among the forefathers. My dear Urdhava, among the demoniac sons of Diti, know me to be Prahlad Maharaj, the saintly lord of the Asuras. Among the stars and herbs, I am their lord, Chandra, the moon. And among yakshas and rakshasas, I am the lord of wealth, Kuvera. I am Airavata among lordly elephants, and among aquatics I am Varuna, the lord of the seas. Among all things that heat and illuminate, I am the sun, and among human beings I am the king. Among horses I am Uchai-Shrava, and I am gold among metals. I am Yamaraj among those who suppress and punish, and among serpents I am Vasuki. O sinless Urdhava, among the best of snakes I am Anantadeva, and among those animals with sharp horns and teeth I am the lion. Among the social orders I am the fourth or the renounced order of life, and among the occupational divisions I am the first, the Brahmins. Among sacred and flowing things I am the holy Ganges, and among steady bodies of water I am the ocean. Among weapons I am the bow, and of the wielders of weapons I am Lord Shiva. Among residences I am Mount Sumeru, and of impervious places I am the Himalayas. Among trees I am the holy fig tree, and among plants I am those that bear grains. Among priests I am Vasishta Muni, and among those highly situated in Vedic culture I am Brihaspati. I am Kartikeya among great military leaders, and among those advancing in superior ways of life I am the great personality, Lord Brahma. Among sacrifices I am study of the Veda, and I am non-violence among vows. Among all things that purify I am the wind, fire, the sun, water, and speech. Among the 8 progressive states of yoga, I am the final stage, samadhi, in which the soul is completely separated from illusion. Among those desiring victory, I am prudent political counsel. And among processes of expert discrimination, I am the science of the soul, by which one distinguishes spirit from matter. Among all speculative philosophers, I am diversity of perception. Among ladies, I am Shatarupa, and among male personalities, I am her husband, Svayambhuva Manu. I am Narayan among the sages, and Sanat Kumara among brahmacharis. Among religious principles, I am renunciation, and of all types of security, I am consciousness of the eternal soul within. Of secrets, I am pleasant speech and silence, and among sexual pairs, I am Brahma. Among the vigilant cycles of time, I am the year, and among seasons, I am spring. Among months, I am Margashirsha, and among lunar houses, I am the auspicious Abhijit. Among ages, I am the Satya Yuga, the age of truth, and among steady sages, I am Devala and Asita. Among those who have divided the Vedas, I am Krishna Dvaipayana Veda Vyas, and among learned scholars, I am Shukracharya, the knower of spiritual science. Among those entitled to the name Bhagavan, I am Vasudeva, and indeed you, Urdhava, represent me among the devotees. I am Hanuman among the Kimpurushas, and among the Vidyadharas, I am Sudarshan. Among jewels, I am the ruby, and among beautiful things, I am the lotus cup. Among all types of grass, I am the sacred kusha, and of oblations, I am ghee and other ingredients obtained from the cow. Among the enterprising, I am fortune, and among the cheaters, I am gambling. I am the forgiveness of the tolerant, and the good qualities of those in the mode of goodness. Of the powerful, I am bodily and mental strength, and I am the devotional activities of my devotees. My devotees worship me in 9 different forms, among which I am the original and primary Vasudeva. Among the Gandharvas, I am Vishvavasu, and I am Purvachiti among the heavenly Apsaras. I am the steadiness of mountains, and the fragrant aroma of the earth. I am the sweet taste of water, and among brilliant things I am the sun. I am the effulgence of the sun, moon, and stars, and I am the transcendental sound that vibrates in the sky. Among those dedicated to Brahminical culture, I am Bali Maharaj, the son of Virochana, and I am Arjun among heroes. Indeed, I am the creation, maintenance, and annihilation of all living entities. I am the functions of the 5 working senses, the legs, speech, anus, hands, and sex organs, as well as those of the 5 knowledge-acquiring senses, touch, sight, taste, hearing, and smell. I am also the potency by which each of the senses experiences its particular sense object. I am form, taste, aroma, touch, and sound, false ego, the Mahatattva, earth, water, fire, air, and sky, the living entity, material nature, the modes of goodness, passion, and ignorance, and the transcendental Lord. All these items, along with knowledge of their individual symptoms and the steady conviction that results from this knowledge, represent me. As the Supreme Lord, I am the basis of the living entity, of the modes of nature, and of the Mahatattva. Thus I am everything, and nothing whatsoever can exist without me. Even though, over a period of time, I might count all the atoms of the universe, I could not count all of my opulences, which I manifest within innumerable universes. Whatever power, beauty, fame, opulence, humility, renunciation, mental pleasure, fortune, strength, tolerance, or spiritual knowledge there may be, is simply an expansion of my opulence. I have briefly described to you all my spiritual opulences, and also the extraordinary material features of my creation, which are perceived by the mind and defined in different ways according to circumstances. Therefore, control your speaking, subdue your mind, conquer the life air, regulate the senses, and through purified intelligence bring your rational faculties under control. In this way, you will never again fall onto the path of material existence. A transcendentalist who does not completely control his words and mind by superior intelligence will find that his spiritual vows, austerities, and charity flow away, just as water flows out of an unbaked clay pot. Being surrendered to me, one should control the speech, mind, and life air, and then through loving devotional intelligence, one will completely fulfill the mission of life. Thus ends the 16th chapter of the 11th canto of the Shrimad Bhagavatam, entitled The Lord's Opulence. And now chapter 17, Lord Krishna's description of the Varnashram system. Sri Urdhava said, My dear Lord, previously you described the principles of devotional service that are to be practiced by followers of the Varnashram system, and even ordinary unregulated human beings. My dear lotus-eyed Lord, now please explain to me how all human beings can achieve loving service unto you by the execution of their prescribed duties. My dear Lord, O mighty armed one, previously in your form of Lord Hamsa, you spoke to Lord Brahma those religious principles that bring supreme happiness to the practitioner. My dear Madhava, now much time has passed, and that which you previously instructed will soon practically cease to exist, O subduer of the enemy. My dear Lord Achyuta, there is no other speaker, creator, and protector of supreme religious principles other than your lordship, either on the earth or even in the assembly of Lord Brahma, where the personified Vedas reside. Thus, my dear Lord Madhusudana, when you, who are the very creator, protector, and speaker of spiritual knowledge, abandon the earth, who will again speak this lost knowledge? Therefore, my Lord, since you are the knower of all religious principles, please describe to me the human beings who may execute the path of loving service to you, and how such service is to be rendered.
Sri Urdhava, the best of devotees, thus inquired from the Lord. Hearing his question, the personality of Godhead, Sri Krishna, was pleased, and for the welfare of all conditioned souls, spoke those religious principles that are eternal. He said,
My dear Urdhava, your question is faithful to religious principles, and thus gives rise to the highest perfection in life, pure devotional service, for both ordinary human beings and the followers of the Varnashram system. Now please learn from me those supreme religious principles. In the beginning, in Satya Yuga, there is only one social class, called Hamsa, to which all human beings belong. In that age, all people are unalloyed devotees of the Lord from birth, and thus learned scholars call this first age Krita Yuga, or the age in which all religious duties are perfectly fulfilled. In Satya Yuga, the undivided Veda is expressed by the syllable Om, and I am the only object of mental activities. I become manifest as the four-legged bull of religion, and thus the inhabitants of Satya Yuga, fixed in austerity and free from all sins, worship me as Lord Hamsa. O greatly fortunate one, at the beginning of Treta Yuga, Vedic knowledge appeared from my heart, which is the abode of the air of life in three divisions, as Rig, Sama, and Yajur. Then, from that knowledge, I appeared as threefold sacrifice. In Treta Yuga, the four social orders are manifested from the universal form of the personality of Godhead. The Brahmins appear from the Lord's face, the Kshatriyas from the Lord's arms, the Vaishyas from the Lord's thighs, and the Shudras from the legs of that mighty form. Each social division is recognized by its particular duties and behavior. The married order of life appears from the loins of my universal form, and the celibate students come from my heart. The forest-dwelling retired order of life appears from my chest, and the renounced order of life is situated within the head of my universal form. The various occupational and social divisions of human society appeared according to inferior and superior natures manifest in the situation of the individual's birth. Peacefulness, self-control, austerity, cleanliness, satisfaction, tolerance, simple straightforwardness, devotion to me, mercy, and truthfulness are the natural qualities of the Brahmins. Dynamic power, bodily strength, determination, heroism, tolerance, generosity, great endeavor, steadiness, devotion to the Brahmins, and leadership are the natural qualities of the Kshatriyas. Faith in Vedic civilization, dedication to charity, freedom from hypocrisy, service to the Brahmins, and perpetually desiring to accumulate more money are the natural qualities of the Vaishyas. Service without duplicity to the Brahmins, cows, demigods, and other worshipable personalities, and complete satisfaction with whatever income is obtained in such service are the natural qualities of Shudras. Dirtiness, dishonesty, thievery, faithlessness, useless quarrel, lust, anger, and hankering constitute the nature of those in the lowest position outside the Varnashram system. Nonviolence, truthfulness, honesty, desire for the happiness and welfare of all others, and freedom from lust, anger, and greed constitute duties for all members of society. The twice-born member of society achieves second birth through the sequence of purificatory ceremonies culminating in Gayatri initiation. Being summoned by the spiritual master, he should reside within the Guru's ashram, and with a self-controlled mind carefully study the Vedic literature. The brahmachari should regularly dress with a belt of straw and deerskin garments. He should wear matted hair, carry a rod and water pot, and be decorated with aksha beads and a sacred thread. Carrying pure kusha grass in his hand, he should never accept a luxurious or sensuous sitting place. He should not unnecessarily polish his teeth, nor should he bleach and iron his clothes. A brahmachari should always remain silent while bathing, eating, attending sacrificial performances, chanting japa, or passing stool and urine. He should not cut his nails and hair, including the armpit and pubic hair. One observing the vow of celibate brahmachari life should never pass semen. If the semen by chance spills out by itself, the brahmachari should immediately take bath in water, control his breath by pranayam, and chant the Gayatri mantra. Purified and fixed in consciousness, the brahmachari should worship the fire god, sun, acharya, cows, brahmins, guru, elderly respectable persons, and demigods. He should perform such worship at sunrise and sunset, without speaking, but by silently chanting or murmuring the appropriate mantras. One should know the acharya as myself, and never disrespect him in any way. One should not envy him, thinking him an ordinary man, for he is the representative of all the demigods. In the morning and evening, one should collect foodstuffs and other articles, and deliver them to the spiritual master. Then, being self-controlled, one should accept for oneself that which is allotted by the acharya. While engaged in serving the spiritual master, one should remain as a humble servant, and thus when the guru is walking, the servant should humbly walk behind. When the guru lies down to sleep, the servant should also lie down nearby. And when the guru has awakened, the servant should sit near him, massaging his lotus feet and rendering other similar services. When the guru is sitting down on his asan, the servant should stand nearby with folded hands, awaiting the guru's order. In this way, one should always worship the spiritual master. Until the student has completed his Vedic education, he should remain engaged in the ashram of the spiritual master, should remain completely free of material sense gratification, and should not break his vow of celibacy or brahmacharya. If the brahmachari student desires to ascend to the Mahaloka or Brahmaloka planets, then he should completely surrender his activities to the spiritual master, and, observing the powerful vow of perpetual celibacy, dedicate himself to superior Vedic studies. Thus enlightened in Vedic knowledge by service to the spiritual master, freed from all sins and duality, one should worship me as the Supersoul, as I appear within fire, the spiritual master, one's own self, and all living entities. Those who are not married, sannyasis, vanaprasthas, and brahmacharis, should never associate with women by glancing, touching, conversing, joking, or sporting. Neither should they ever associate with any living entity engaged in sexual activities. My dear Urdhava, general cleanliness, washing the hands, taking bath, performing religious services at sunrise, noon, and sunset, worshipping me, visiting holy places, chanting japa, avoiding that which is untouchable, unedible, or not to be discussed, and remembering my existence within all living entities as the Supersoul, together constitute principles to be followed by all members of society through regulation of the mind, words, and body. A Brahmin observing the great vow of celibacy becomes brilliant like fire, and by serious austerity burns to ashes the propensity to perform material activities. Free from the contamination of material desire, he becomes my devotee. A brahmachari who has completed his Vedic education and desires to enter household life should offer proper remuneration to the spiritual master, take bath, cut his hair, put on proper clothes, and so on, and taking permission from the guru should go back to his home. A brahmachari desiring to fulfill his material desires should live at home with his family, and a householder who is eager to purify his consciousness should enter the forest, whereas a purified Brahmin should accept the renounced order of life. one who is not surrendered to me should move progressively from one ashram to another, never acting otherwise. One who desires to establish family life should marry a wife of his own caste, who is beyond reproach and younger in age. If one desires to accept many wives, he must marry them after the first marriage, and each wife should be of a successively lower caste. All twice-born men, Brahmins, Kshatriyas, and Vaishyas, must perform sacrifice, study the Vedic literature, and give charity. Only the Brahmins, however, accept charity, teach the Vedic knowledge, and perform sacrifice on behalf of others. A Brahmin who considers that accepting charity from others will destroy his austerity, spiritual influence, and fame should maintain himself by the other two Brahminical occupations, namely teaching Vedic knowledge and performing sacrifice. If the Brahmin considers that those two occupations also compromise his spiritual position, then he should collect rejected grains in agricultural fields and live without any dependence on others. The body of a Brahmin is not intended to enjoy insignificant material sense gratification. Rather, by accepting difficult austerities in his life, a Brahmin will enjoy unlimited happiness after death. A Brahmin householder should remain satisfied in mind by gleaning rejected grains from agricultural fields and marketplaces. Keeping himself free of personal desire, he should practice magnanimous religious principles with consciousness absorbed in me. In this way, a Brahmin may stay at home as a householder without very much attachment and thus achieve liberation. Just as a ship rescues those who have fallen into the ocean, similarly, I very quickly rescue from all calamities those persons who uplift Brahmins and devotees suffering in a poverty-stricken condition. Just as the chief bull elephant protects all other elephants in his herd and defends himself as well, similarly, a fearless king, just like a father, must save all of the citizens from difficulty and also protect himself. An earthly king who protects himself and all citizens by removing all sins from his kingdom will certainly enjoy with Lord Indra in airplanes as brilliant as the sun. If a Brahmin cannot support himself through his regular duties and is thus suffering, he may adopt the occupation of a merchant and overcome his destitute condition by buying and selling material things. If he continues to suffer extreme poverty even as a merchant, then he may adopt the occupation of a kshatriya, taking sword in hand. But he cannot, in any circumstances, become like a dog, accepting an ordinary master. A king or other member of the royal order who cannot maintain himself by his normal occupation may act as a Vaishya, may live by hunting, or may act as a Brahmin by teaching others Vedic knowledge. But he may not, under any circumstances, adopt the profession of a Shudra. A Vaishya or mercantile man who cannot maintain himself may adopt the occupation of a Shudra, and a Shudra who cannot find a master can engage in simple activities like making baskets and mats of straw. However, all members of society who have adopted inferior occupations in emergency situations must give up those substitute occupations when the difficulties have passed. One in the Grahastha order of life should daily worship the sages by Vedic study, the forefathers by offering the mantra Svadha, the demigods by chanting Svaha, all living entities by offering shares of one's meals, and human beings by offering grains and water. Thus, considering the demigods, sages, forefathers, living entities, and human beings to be manifestations of my potency, one should daily perform these 5 sacrifices. A householder should comfortably maintain his dependence, either with money that comes of its own accord, or with that gathered by honest execution of one's duties. According to one's means, one should perform sacrifices and other religious ceremonies. A householder taking care of many dependent family members should not become materially attached to them, nor should he become mentally unbalanced, considering himself to be the Lord. An intelligent householder should see that all possible future happiness, just like that which he has already experienced, is temporary. The association of children, wife, relatives, and friends is just like the brief meeting of travelers. With each change of body, one is separated from all such associates, just as one loses the objects one possesses in a dream when the dream is over. Deeply considering the actual situation, a liberated soul should live at home just like a guest, without any sense of proprietorship or false ego. In this way, he will not be bound or entangled by domestic affairs. A householder devotee who worships me by execution of his family duties may remain at home, go to a holy place, or, having a responsible son, may take sannyas. But a householder whose mind is attached to his home, and who is thus disturbed by ardent desires to enjoy his money and children, who is lusty after women, who is possessed of a miserly mentality, and who unintelligently thinks, "Everything is mine, and I am everything," is certainly bound in illusion. He may think, "Oh, my poor elderly parents, and my wife with a mere infant in her arms, and my other young children. Without me, they have absolutely no one to protect them, and will suffer unbearably. How can my poor relatives possibly live without me?" Thus, because of his foolish mentality, a householder whose heart is overwhelmed by family attachment is never satisfied. Constantly meditating on his relatives, he dies and enters into the darkness of ignorance. Thus ends the 17th chapter of the 11th canto of the Shrimad Bhagavatam, entitled Lord Krishna's Description of the Varnashram System. And now chapter 18, Lord Krishna's Description of Varnashram Dharma. The Supreme Personality of Godhead said, "One who desires to adopt the 3rd order of life, Vanaprastha, should enter the forest with a peaceful mind, leaving his wife with his mature sons, or else taking her along with him. Having adopted the Vanaprastha order of life, one should arrange one's sustenance by eating uncontaminated bulbs, roots, and fruits that grow in the forest. One may dress oneself with tree bark, grass, leaves, or animal skins. The Vanaprastha should not groom the hair on his head, body, or face, should not manicure his nails, should not pass stool and urine at irregular times, and should not make a special endeavor for dental hygiene. He should be content to take bath in water 3 times daily and should sleep on the ground. Thus engaged as a Vanaprastha, one should execute penance during the hottest summer days by subjecting oneself to burning fires on 4 sides and the blazing sun overhead. During the rainy season, one should remain outside, subjecting oneself to torrents of rain. And in the freezing winter, one should remain submerged in water up to one's neck. One may eat foodstuffs prepared with fire, such as grains, or fruits ripened by time. One may grind one's food with mortar and stone, or with one's own teeth. The Vanaprastha should personally collect whatever he requires for his bodily maintenance, carefully considering the time, place, and his own capacity. He should never collect provisions for the future. One who has accepted the Vanaprastha order of life should perform seasonal sacrifices by offering oblations of charu and sacrificial cakes prepared from rice and other grains found in the forest. The Vanaprastha, however, may never offer animal sacrifices to me, even those sacrifices mentioned in the Vedas. The Vanaprastha should perform the Agnihotra, Darsha, and Purnamasa sacrifices, as he did while in the Grahastha ashram. He should also perform the vows and sacrifices of Chaturmasya, since all of these rituals are enjoined for the Vanaprastha ashram by expert knowers of the Vedas. The saintly Vanaprastha, practicing severe penances and accepting only the bare necessities of life, becomes so emaciated that he appears to be mere skin and bones. Thus, worshipping me through severe penances, he goes to the Mahaloka planet and then directly achieves me. One who, with long endeavor, executes this painful but exalted penance, which awards ultimate liberation, simply to achieve insignificant sense gratification, must be considered the greatest fool. If the Vanaprastha is overtaken by old age, and because of his trembling body is no longer able to execute his prescribed duties, he should place the sacrificial fire within his heart by meditation. Then, fixing his mind in me, he should enter into the fire and give up his body. If the Vanaprastha, understanding that even promotion to Brahmaloka is a miserable situation, develops complete detachment from all possible results of fruitive activities, then he may take the sannyas order of life. Having worshipped me according to scriptural injunctions, and having given all one's property to the sacrificial priest, one should place the fire sacrifice within oneself. Thus, with the mind completely detached, one should enter the sannyas order of life. The demigods think, this man taking sannyas is going to surpass us and go back home, back to Godhead. Thus thinking, the demigods create stumbling blocks in the path of the sannyasi by appearing before him in the shape of his former wife or other women and attractive objects. But the sannyasi should pay the demigods and their manifestations no heed. If the sannyasi desires to wear something besides a mere kopina, he may use another cloth around his waist and hips to cover the kopina. Otherwise, if there is no emergency, he should not accept anything besides his danda and water pot. A saintly person should step or place his foot on the ground only after verifying with his eyes that there are no living creatures, such as insects, who might be injured by his foot. He should drink water only after filtering it through a portion of his cloth, and he should speak only words that possess the purity of truth. Similarly, he should perform only those activities his mind has carefully ascertained to be pure. One who has not accepted the three internal disciplines of avoiding useless speech, avoiding useless activities, and controlling the life air, can never be considered a sannyasi merely because of his carrying bamboo rods. Rejecting those houses that are polluted and untouchable, one should approach, without previous calculation, 7 houses, and be satisfied with that which is obtained there by begging. According to necessity, one may approach each of the 4 occupational orders of society. Taking the foodstuffs gathered through begging, one should leave the populated areas and go to a reservoir of water in a secluded place. There, having taken bath and washed one's hands thoroughly, remaining silent, one should distribute portions of the foodstuffs to others who may request it. Then, having thoroughly cleansed the remnants, one should eat everything on one's plate, leaving nothing for future consumption. Without any material attachment, with senses fully controlled, remaining enthusiastic, and satisfied in realization of the Supreme Lord and his own self, the saintly person should travel about the earth alone. Having equal vision everywhere, he should be steady on the spiritual platform. Dwelling in a safe and solitary place, his mind purified by constant thought of me, the sage should concentrate on the soul alone, realizing it to be non-different from me. By steady knowledge, a sage should clearly ascertain the nature of the soul's bondage and liberation. Bondage occurs when the senses are deviated to sense gratification, and complete control of the senses constitutes liberation. Therefore, completely controlling the five senses and the mind by Krishna consciousness, a sage, having experienced spiritual bliss within the self, should live detached from insignificant material sense gratification. The sage should travel in sanctified places, by flowing rivers, and within the solitude of mountains and forests. He should enter the cities, towns, and pasturing grounds, and approach ordinary working men only to beg his bare sustenance. One in the Vanaprastha order of life should always practice taking charity from others, for one is thereby freed from illusion and quickly becomes perfect in spiritual life. Indeed, one who subsists on food grains obtained in such a humble manner purifies his existence. One should never see as ultimate reality those material things which obviously will perish. With consciousness free from material attachment, one should retire from all activities meant for material progress in this life and the next. One should logically consider the universe, which is situated within the Lord, and one's own material body, which is composed of mind, speech, and life air, to be ultimately products of the Lord's illusory energy. Thus situated in the self, one should give up one's faith in these things and should never again make them the object of one's meditation. A learned transcendentalist dedicated to the cultivation of knowledge and thus detached from external objects, or my devotee who is detached even from desire for liberation, both neglect those duties based on external rituals or paraphernalia. Thus their conduct is beyond the range of rules and regulations. Although most wise, the Paramahamsa should enjoy life like a child, oblivious to honor and dishonor. Although most expert, he should behave like a stunted, incompetent person. Although most learned, he should speak like an insane person. And although a scholar, learned in Vedic regulations, he should behave in an unrestricted manner. A devotee should never engage in fruitive rituals mentioned in the Karmakanda section of the Vedas, nor should he become atheistic, acting or speaking in opposition to Vedic injunctions. Similarly, he should never speak like a mere logician or skeptic, or take any side whatsoever in useless arguments. A saintly person should never let others frighten or disturb him, and similarly should never frighten or disturb other people. He should tolerate the insults of others, and should never himself belittle anyone. He should never create hostility with anyone for the sake of the material body, for he would thus be no better than an animal. The one Supreme Lord is situated within all material bodies and within everyone's soul. Just as the moon is reflected in innumerable reservoirs of water, the Supreme Lord, although one, is present within everyone. Thus every material body is ultimately composed of the energy of the one Supreme Lord. If at times one does not obtain proper food, one should not be depressed, and when one obtains sumptuous food, one should not rejoice. Being fixed in determination, one should understand both situations to be under the control of God. If required, one should endeavor to get sufficient foodstuffs, because it is always necessary and proper to maintain one's health. When the senses, mind, and life air are fit, one can contemplate spiritual truth, and by understanding the truth, one is liberated. A sage should accept the food, clothing, and bedding, be they of excellent or inferior quality, that come of their own accord. Just as I, the Supreme Lord, execute regulative duties by my own free will, similarly, one who has realized knowledge of me should maintain general cleanliness, purify his hands with water, take bath, and execute other regulative duties, not by force, but by his own free will. A realized soul no longer sees anything as separate from me, for his realized knowledge of me has destroyed such illusory perception. Since the material body and mind were previously accustomed to this kind of perception, it may sometimes appear to reoccur. But at the time of death, the self-realized soul achieves opulences equal to mine. One who is detached from sense gratification, knowing its result to be miserable, and who desires spiritual perfection, but has not seriously analyzed the process for obtaining me, should approach a bona fide and learned spiritual master. Until a devotee has clearly realized spiritual knowledge, he should continue with great faith and respect, and without envy, to render personal service to the Guru, who is none different from me. One who has not controlled the 6 forms of illusion, that is lust, anger, greed, excitement, false pride, and intoxication, whose intelligence, the leader of the senses, is extremely attached to material things, who is bereft of knowledge and detachment, who adopts the sannyas order of life to make a living, who denies the worshipable demigods, his own self, and the Supreme Lord within himself, thus ruining all religious principles, and who is still infected by material contamination, is deviated and lost both in this life and the next. The main religious duties of a sannyasi are equanimity and non-violence, whereas for the vanaprastha, austerity and philosophical understanding of the difference between the body and the soul are prominent. The main duties of a householder are to give shelter to all living entities and perform sacrifices, and the brahmachari is mainly engaged in serving the spiritual master. A householder may approach his wife for sex only at the time prescribed for begetting children. Otherwise, the householder should practice celibacy, austerity, cleanliness of mind and body, satisfaction in his natural position, and friendship toward all living entities. Worship of me is to be practiced by all human beings regardless of social or occupational divisions. One who worships me by his prescribed duty, having no other object of worship, and who remains conscious of me as present in all living entities, achieves unflinching devotional service unto me. My dear Urdhava, I am the Supreme Lord of all worlds, and I create and destroy this universe, being its ultimate cause. I am thus the absolute truth, and one who worships me with unfailing devotional service comes to me. Thus one who has purified his existence by execution of his prescribed duties, who fully understands my supreme position, and who is endowed with scriptural and realized knowledge, very soon achieves me. Those who are followers of this varnashram system accept religious principles according to authorized traditions of proper conduct. When such varnashram duties are dedicated to me in loving service, they award the supreme perfection of life. My dear saintly Urdhava, I have now described to you, just as you inquired, the means by which my devotee, perfectly engaged in his prescribed duty, can come back to me, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Thus ends the 18th chapter of the 11th canto of the Shrimad Bhagavatam, entitled Lord Krishna's Description of Varnashram Dharma. And now chapter 19, the perfection of spiritual knowledge. The Supreme Personality of Godhead said, a self-realized person who has cultivated scriptural knowledge up to the point of enlightenment and who is free from impersonal speculation, understanding the material universe to be simply illusion, should surrender unto me both that knowledge and the means by which he achieved it. For learned, self-realized philosophers, I am the only object of worship, the desired goal of life, the means for achieving that goal, and the settled conclusion of all knowledge. Indeed, because I am the cause of their happiness and their freedom from unhappiness, such learned souls have no effective purpose or dear object in life except me. Those who have achieved complete perfection through philosophical and realized knowledge recognize my lotus feet to be the supreme transcendental object. Thus the learned transcendentalist is most dear to me, and by his perfect knowledge he maintains me in happiness. That perfection which is produced by a small fraction of spiritual knowledge cannot be duplicated by performing austerities, visiting holy places, chanting silent prayers, giving in charity, or engaging in other pious activities. Therefore, my dear Urdhava, through knowledge you should understand your actual self, and then advancing by clear realization of Vedic knowledge, you should worship me in the mood of loving devotion. Formerly, great sages, through the sacrifice of Vedic knowledge and spiritual enlightenment, worshipped me within themselves, knowing me to be the Supreme Lord of all sacrifice, and the Supersoul in everyone's heart. Thus, coming to me, these sages achieved the supreme perfection. My dear Urdhava, the material body and mind, composed of the three modes of material nature, attach themselves to you, but they are actually illusion, since they appear only at the present, having no original or ultimate existence. How is it possible, therefore, that the various stages of the body, namely birth, growth, reproduction, maintenance, dwindling, and death, can have any relation to your eternal self? These phases relate only to the material body, which previously did not exist, and ultimately will not exist. The body exists merely at the present moment. O Lord of the universe, O form of the universe, please explain to me that process of knowledge which automatically brings detachment and direct perception of the truth, which is transcendental and is traditional among great spiritual philosophers. This knowledge, sought after by elevated personalities, describes loving devotional service unto your Lordship. My dear Lord, for one who is being tormented on the terrible path of birth and death, and is constantly overwhelmed by the threefold miseries, I do not see any possible shelter other than your two lotus feet, which are just like a refreshing umbrella that pours down showers of delicious nectar. O Almighty Lord, please be merciful and uplift this hopeless living entity who has fallen into the dark hole of material existence, where the snake of time has bitten him. In spite of such abominable conditions, this poor living entity has tremendous desire to relish the most insignificant material happiness. Please save me, my Lord, by pouring down the nectar of your instructions, which awaken one to spiritual freedom. My dear Urdhava, Just as you are now inquiring for me, similarly in the past, King Yudhishthir, who considered no one his enemy, inquired from the greatest of the upholders of religious principles, Bhishma, while all of us were carefully listening. When the great battle of Kurukshetra had ended, King Yudhishthir was overwhelmed by the death of many beloved well-wishers, and thus, after listening to instructions about many religious principles, he finally inquired about the path of liberation. I will now speak unto you those religious principles of Vedic knowledge, detachment, self-realization, faith, and devotional service that were heard directly from the mouth of Bhishma Dev. I personally approve of that knowledge by which one sees the combination of 9, 11, 5, and 3 elements in all living entities, and ultimately 1 element within those 28. When one no longer sees the 28 separated material elements which arise from a single cause, but rather sees the cause itself, the personality of Godhead, at that time one's direct experience is called vijnana, or self-realization. Commencement, termination, and maintenance are the stages of material causation. That which consistently accompanies all these material phases from one creation to another, and remains alone when all material phases are annihilated, is the One Eternal. From the 4 types of evidence, Vedic knowledge, direct experience, traditional wisdom, and logical induction, one can understand the temporary, insubstantial situation of the material world by which one becomes detached from the duality of this world. An intelligent person should see that any material activity is subject to constant transformation, and that even on the planet of Lord Brahma there is thus simply unhappiness. Indeed, a wise man can understand that just as all that he has seen is temporary, similarly all things within the universe have a beginning and an end. O sinless Urdhava, because you love me, I previously explained to you the process of devotional service. Now I will again explain the supreme process for achieving loving service unto me. Firm faith in the blissful narrations of my pastimes, constant chanting of my glories, unwavering attachment to ceremonial worship of me, praising me through beautiful hymns, great respect for my devotional service, offering obeisances with the entire body, performing first-class worship of my devotees, consciousness of me in all living entities, offering of ordinary bodily activities in my devotional service, use of words to describe my qualities, offering the mind to me, rejection of all material desires, giving up wealth for my devotional service, renouncing material sense gratification and happiness, and performing all desirable activities such as charity, sacrifice, chanting, vows, and austerities with the purpose of achieving me, these constitute actual religious principles by which those human beings who have actually surrendered themselves to me automatically develop love for me. What other purpose or goal could remain for my devotee? When one's peaceful consciousness, strengthened by the mode of goodness, is fixed on the personality of Godhead, one achieves religiosity, knowledge, detachment, and opulence. When consciousness is fixed on the material body, home, and other similar objects of sense gratification, then one spends one's life chasing after material objects with the help of the senses. Consciousness, thus powerfully affected by the mode of passion, becomes dedicated to impermanent things, and in this way irreligion, ignorance, attachment, and wretchedness arise. Actual religious principles are stated to be those that lead one to my devotional service. Real knowledge is the awareness that reveals my all-pervading presence. Detachment is complete disinterest in the objects of material sense gratification, and opulence is the 8 mystic perfections such as Anima Siddhi. My dear Lord Krishna, O chastiser of the enemies, please tell me how many types of disciplinary regulations and regular daily duties there are. Also, my Lord, tell me what is mental equilibrium, what is self-control, and what is the actual meaning of tolerance and steadfastness? What are charity, austerity, and heroism? And how are reality and truth to be described? What is renunciation? And what is wealth? What is desirable? What is sacrifice? And what is religious remuneration? My dear Keshava, O most fortunate one, how am I to understand the strength, opulence, and profit of a particular person? What is the best education? What is actual humility? And what is real beauty? What are happiness and unhappiness? Who is learned and who is a fool? What are the true and false paths in life? And what are heaven and hell? Who is indeed a true friend, and what is one's real home? Who is a rich man, and who is a poor man? Who is wretched, and who is an actual controller? O Lord of the devotees, kindly explain these matters to me along with their opposites. O Urdhava, non-violence, truthfulness, not coveting or stealing the property of others, detachment, humility, freedom from possessiveness, trust in the principles of religion, celibacy, silence, steadiness, forgiveness, and fearlessness are the 12 primary disciplinary principles. Internal cleanliness, external cleanliness, chanting the holy names of the Lord, austerity, sacrifice, faith, hospitality, worship of me, visiting holy places, acting and desiring only for the supreme interest, satisfaction, and service to the spiritual master are the 12 elements of regular prescribed duties. These 24 elements bestow all desired benedictions upon those persons who devotedly cultivate them. Absorbing the intelligence in me constitutes mental equilibrium, and complete discipline of the senses is self-control. Tolerance means patiently enduring unhappiness, and steadfastness occurs when one conquers the tongue and genitals. The greatest charity is to give up all aggression toward others, and renunciation of lust is understood to be real austerity. Real heroism is to conquer one's natural tendency to enjoy material life, and reality is seeing the Supreme Personality of Godhead everywhere. Truthfulness means to speak the truth in a pleasing way, as declared by great sages. Cleanliness is detachment in fruitive activities, whereas renunciation is the sannyas order of life. The true desirable wealth for human beings is religiousness, and I, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, am sacrifice. Religious remuneration is devotion to the acharya with the purpose of acquiring spiritual instruction, and the greatest strength is the pranayama system of breath control. Actual opulence is my own nature as the Personality of Godhead, through which I exhibit the 6 unlimited opulences. The supreme gain in life is devotional service to me, and actual education is nullifying the false perception of duality within the soul. Real modesty is to be disgusted with improper activities, and beauty is to possess good qualities such as detachment. Real happiness is to transcend material happiness and unhappiness, and real misery is to be implicated in searching for sex pleasure. A wise man is one who knows the process of freedom from bondage, and a fool is one who identifies with his material body and mind. The real path in life is that which leads to me, and the wrong path is sense gratification, by which consciousness is bewildered. Actual heaven is the predominance of the mode of goodness, whereas hell is the predominance of ignorance. I am everyone's true friend, acting as the spiritual master of the entire universe, and one's home is the human body. My dear friend Urdhava, one who is enriched with good qualities is actually said to be rich, and one who is unsatisfied in life is actually poor. A wretched person is one who cannot control his senses, whereas one who is not attached to sense gratification is a real controller. One who attaches himself to sense gratification is the opposite, a slave. Thus, Urdhava, I have elucidated all of the matters about which you inquired. There is no need for a more elaborate description of these good and bad qualities, since to constantly see good and bad is itself a bad quality. The best quality is to transcend material good and evil. Thus ends the 19th chapter of the 11th canto of the Shrimad Bhagavatam, entitled The Perfection of Spiritual Knowledge.